one of my favorite TV shows is Who Do You Think You Are? It's about ancestry, genealogy, etc. And these people will find in their family trees for ancestors they didn't even know existed that say that the fathers always left the families. And so now they're realizing, okay, well, this pattern has been playing out in my family for generations and I didn't know about it because of adoption, etc. So, or people who just couldn't hold down a job, those types of things, behavioral things more than actual illnesses.
Oh, I see. That's what you mean by failure to succeed, like some kind of behavioral pattern that people find out in the show were happening and they're just repeating them, not even knowing that their relatives had them.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting thing because, well, let's start with a basic developmental set of principles. One is, you have genes you inherit that are genetic sequence that determine, for example, your temperament, which would be the neural proclivity of your brain to react in certain ways. And that temperament that is genetically driven and certainly shaped by epigenetics too, combines with your experiences that we call attachment experiences. And that combination of attachment experience and genetic and epigenetic inheritance combine to form your personality. And so what research on identical twins shows is that you can have a high 50% concordance in some cases, sometimes even higher, of identical twins showing these similar behavioral patterns, like going like this, or liking women whose names are Claire, or all sorts of things that you say that's kind of amazing. So that's personality, and that there's a huge genetic / epigenetic contribution to personality features, and you're calling them failure to succeed, but patterns, for example, maybe of not keeping long-term relationships. So sure, yeah, there's a lot of evidence to support that. Now, that being said, even when we have a high genetic factor involved in let's say, development of psychopathology like depression and schizophrenia, you actually see in identical twins it's never 100% for the most part, right? And so then you say, well, why wouldn't it be 100%? Well, because most things are not determined 100% by genes. Genes may make you have a vulnerability, but you need to combine them with other factors like difficult experiences or infectious agents or toxins you're exposed to, for example, with schizophrenia, so that you may be vulnerable, but you need something that pushes you over just being vulnerable into having, this problem essentially with impaired integration in the brain, linking of differentiated parts. So, so even when you say, oh, is it nature versus nurture? And you should never use the word versus. It's always nature and nurture. And that's really important to empower us to say that even if you have a genetic or epigenetic things that you've either inherited or you've acquired because you yourself were an abuse victim, there's lots of reasons to suggest we can grow past those genetic vulnerabilities, those epigenetic vulnerabilities, by using our mind to actually change the way the brain functions and actually its structure, and even alter 5 of the ways that probably those early experiences, adverse experiences, compromise medical health, even if you've epigenetically inherited them, which is you can reduce the stress hormone cortisol, you can reduce inflammation by actually altering epigenetic regulators using your mind in ways we can talk about. You can optimize your cardiovascular way of functioning. You can improve the immune system's functioning, and you can elevate the levels and optimize them of telomerase, this enzyme that repairs and maintains the ends of your chromosomes, which are called telomeres. And these are like caps on the chromosomes, which are like caps on a shoelace. When you get stressed and get older, the telomeres reduce in their length. When they get short enough, the whole double helix DNA, when it unwinds to make the RNA and tries to come back together again, it fragments. And then the cell becomes unhealthy and then dies, and you become unhealthy and die. So telomere length is an important measure of aging. Telomerase levels optimize the caps on the chromosomes. And now we know what you do with your mind and living in relationships that are compassionate and respectful, how you live a life of purpose, how you develop what's called presence. All of those things optimize telomerase levels. So what I say to people who might be listening to this, you know, how have I inherited across the generations trauma, or if I was traumatized and I have that high ACEs score, adverse childhood experiences scale, you know, I have a high ACEs score, you know, what do I do? Well, actually, there are things you can do to change the way these epigenetic factors are placing you at risk. So even though we're learning about this and it's so important and you can even inherit them, it doesn't mean you are helpless. And it doesn't mean that difficult early experiences that you've had or difficult experiences your ancestors have to mean that, oh my God, I'm doomed. It's quite the opposite. We now know you can use your mind to shape how you focus attention, because where attention goes, neural firing flows and neural connection grows. You can change these 5 factors and even make the brain more integrated. And all these things are incredibly positive news, even in the face of understanding the power of epigenetics to change how our brains function.
All right. Wow. Thank you for that. That's good news. Now, I wanted to talk about some studies. I've read a study that says that 9/11 widows, women who were pregnant when the Twin Towers went down, gave birth to babies who all showed similar negative effects. And similar studies have been done over Holocaust survivors, as you've mentioned, descendants of slaves, the Native American trauma, et cetera. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that type of thing, where it's been an actual, you know, a crimes against humanity type situation. How has that affected like the generations?
Right. It's a really great question. And again, we want to start with the empowering news that, you know, if you're African American and come from a history of slavery over hundreds of years here in North America, that there's hope for understanding how that cross-generational passage of being disenfranchised, disempowered, of being kidnapped from your continent can be understood and worked with. If you're someone who's indigenous North American, whether it's in Canada or the United States, and again, we're disenfranchised, disempowered, and you know, the largest Holocaust in the world was the murder of Native peoples here in North America. You know, that is a history that I think modern contemporary culture in the United States has really never fully dealt with. I don't think it's fully dealt with in Canada either. And, you know, it is a very important cultural trauma that is serious and likely has epigenetic changes as well there. And the Holocaust, the same thing. So unfortunately, we humans do these horrible things of enslaving and murdering and performing genocide. That's kind of our thing. It's really sad, isn't it? You know, when you think about our species. Now, at the same time, our species is incredibly capable of compassion and kindness and collaboration. So we should name this thing called dehumanization. When the human brain does this unfortunate primate thing, which we've had for probably around 50 million years, of having in-group, out-group distinctions that are made. So our brain basically asks the question, if it could speak, are you like me or not like me? Are you in my in-group because you're like me, or are you not like me and you're the out-group? And it quickly makes that assessment. I mean, as early as 14 months of age, human babies, you know, now 14 months toddlers, are making this assessment where if you show them a cereal they like and you have a green puppet also like that cereal, and you show them a cereal that they don't like let's say they don't like cornflakes, but they like Rice Krispies. So now you have the red puppet like the cornflakes that the kid hates. You know, now later on you show them the green puppet that likes their cereal. They're so nice, the green puppet. Then they see the red puppet that likes the cornflakes that they hate. They beat up the puppet. So I don't think a parent sat down with a kid and said, hey, you see some person or puppet that likes the cereal you hate, beat them up. I think it's sort of built into our genes, maybe even epigenetically, I don't know. But it's certainly, I think, inborn to do this in-group, out-group thing. Who's like me, who's not like me. Now, once we do that, studies of older people show that once your brain makes an assessment, are you like me or not like me, it literally shuts off what we call mind sight circuitry. That is, where I make a map of your mind, of your emotions, of your attention, of your intention, of your awareness. I have a map of you right now because I see you as a human. I see you as a being with an internal subjective experience called your mind. And I map out that mind in my own nervous system inside of me. Now, evolutionarily, we probably first developed this mind-sight capacity by figuring out the mind of another, because we have something called alloparenting, which is we help each other support the young. So if I have a baby, I can give the baby to you, look at your mind, say, you're trustworthy. I go out and get some food for the whole village, and you've been in charge of the baby. And we could do that, right? Alloparenting. So alloparenting is a unique, very unusual mammal thing to do, very unusual primate thing to do, and it shaped our whole evolution. And allowed us to have this mind-sight capacity to know the other person's mind and know our own mind. So when we look at a person and put them in the in-group, we create a map of their mind. When we put a person in the out-group, we dehumanize them, we make them as if they don't have a mind, and we can murder them if we feel threatened by them. So part of the epigenetic issue that's raised is there's this vigilance that Steve Porges calls, neuroception. We're constantly looking for, is it safe or dangerous, safe or dangerous? And if we assess it's dangerous, that's a hypervigilance for danger that likely in all these cases you're bringing up are epigenetically acquired, but it builds on a circuitry of in-group, out-group distinction. So you feel like you're in the out-group, but actually you are. So if you're a disempowered African-American in the United States and you're seeing African-Americans being murdered by people, you're just not making it up. Or if you're a white person in the United States and then you're feeling threatened by people who are not white, and then you make this category white race, which doesn't really exist, but in our culture it exists. So now you've come to see, well, if you're not white, you're not in the in-group, so I'm going to get frightened of you if you're in the out-group. And this happens all around the planet. It's what we primates do, not just humans. So we primates do it, but at our large 7 billion person group called humanity, this is a gigantic issue. So you can see literally millions of people being slaughtered in the last 100 years by humans. Whether it's in Rwanda or during the Holocaust, or go further back in time to Native American times, or go to, ripping people away from Africa to enslave them. We have our attitude as they're not human beings. Or I was recently in Australia, and up until the 60s, Aboriginal people in Australia were considered like cattle. Right, and so we do this, or in Jewish history, people in Russia were not allowed to be in villages and cities. They were considered not human, and lived in shtetls. So this is kind of what we humans do. So the point is, for all these things you're mentioning, you can have a vigilance like, oh my gosh, this is not a safe place. When in reality, oh my gosh, it's not a safe place. So it's not like it's creating something that's artificial, it's just intensifying something that creates its own stress.